Social housing. In the field of social housing, CPAG policy direction can be summarised as SASS, or SASS, S-A-S-S. Safe, affordable, secure, supported. Safe, meaning warm and dry. Affordable, needs no explanation really or elaboration. Traditionally, housing costs have been approximately 25 to 33% of a family's income, now in excess of double for no more house. Secure, we are increasingly becoming a nation of renters, and security issues arise there. Supported, wraparound services of the community for those in greatest need. Specifically, CPAG advocates for the following achievable goal. I'll read it now. Commitment to lift the proportion of state-owned units against the total of New Zealand's housing stock from the present 3.2% to 4% by 2030 and 5% by 2040. This means that over the next 7 years, the building of an additional 3,500 units each year to achieve more than 90,000 dwellings by 2030. So beginning with you, Ricardo, the question becomes again, does your party support this policy? If the answer is yes, what are the specific steps your party would implement to carry out the policy and when? If the answer is no, what are the brief but precise reasons for rejecting the policy?
Thank you. This is one of those cases where I'm going to say yes and, because I think we may even want to go a bit further in our pledge to renters plan when it comes to the supply of public housing. And while, again, this government is building more public homes than previous governments combined, the problem is that as part of the construction of public housing, we're still allocating a lot of land in the redevelopment for the construction of private housing, and we think that we've got that wrong. Kāinga ora, the construction wing of the government when it comes to the state housing sector, needs long-term funding commitments, and the Green Party is committed to having long-term funding for Kāinga ora so they can plan ahead. Right now the government only provided one additional year of funding for Kāinga ora, leaving the state housing plan actually with a big question mark. And one of the key ways that we can scale up the building of public housing so that people are not paying more than 25% of their income on rent is by investing in a manufacturing wing of Kāinga ora so that we can scale up the construction. We also support the government buying equity shares in construction companies that may be failing as part of a boom and bust cycle, because our construction industry should not be left to those cycles in order for us to have a stable building environment. We also recognise the role that councils play in the provision of social housing, and we would reverse the changes the previous national government made when it comes to locking councils from being able to provide what we call income-related rent subsidies, which is what guarantees people not having to pay more than 25% of their income on rent. And we know that many councils across the country are ready and they want to build public housing, but not accessing those rent subsidies is a barrier. Finally, it's important that the homes that we're building are warm, safe, and importantly, accessible. And it's important that Kāinga ora commits universal design across the sector so that families have a home from the cradle to the grave, no matter the health conditions or disability. This is something that is completely achievable. We want a rental warrant of fitness and rent controls to also support people in the private sector while we achieve this.
Thank you.
There are 100,000 whānau homeless here in Aotearoa. 60% of those are Māori. There's 94 to 95,000 ghost houses here in Aotearoa. No one in them. It just doesn't make sense that we've got 100,000 whānau homeless. So Te Pāti Māori will implement land banking tax and we want to make sure that those that are sitting on land, those developers that are sitting on land that are not doing anything with it, are forced to actually put those houses up and to build them. We want to make sure that those overseas homeowners that are owning these 95,000 homes are actually forced to put people in renters in their homes within 6 months. We're a country that is so small, yet we have such a big population of homeless. 60,000 of them are Māori. If I think about the community here, the low socioeconomic families here, actually, let me go back. You know, there's this kōrero going around at the moment about elite Māori. You know, I'm potentially considered one of them, but you know what? I don't own my own home. I'm a renter. I can't afford to buy my own home. And why? Why is that? Because there's just so many barriers in the way for our people to buy homes. And we're never going to be able to afford them here in Tamaki Makaurau. I represent the population of urban Māori. We can't afford to buy homes. There needs to be tax reform and radical tax reform, which is what Te Pāti Māori is introducing.
Thanks. Yes, we would agree that we need to have increased social housing. I mean, when you look at the history, we look at 1991 and Jim Bolger's national government, we sold off a whole lot of our social housing. We completely changed how we provided social housing. And you know what? We actually had more social housing in 1991 than we did in 2021, with a 50% increase in population. That doesn't make any sense at all. So what the Opportunities Party would do is actually, you know, I'm not even sure that Kāinga Water is the right provider for providing housing. I mean, look at what's been happening over the last 2 terms. So what we would say is actually, let's create a $3 billion fund to actually support community housing providers, because we know that those people give the real wraparound support for families and good quality housing for the people, for the type of housing that these people need, actually. And you know, further to that, in terms of housing in general, so what we propose is a land value tax, because you know, I read the Te Pāti Māori tax policy today, and I thought it was really interesting, some really good intentions there, rebalancing the system. But I think when you have separate extra conditions on something like a tax, you know, all you end up is producing loopholes, and people will get around those loopholes. So what we want is a broad-based land value tax that is a small amount to pay for actually income tax reduction as well, so we can rebalance the tax system so that we remove the burden from income and put it onto land. And the land value increases only because of public investment into infrastructure to the surrounding land. And the purpose of that is to incentivise increased density as well, so people will build more intensely, and also still leave spaces for green areas, so parks. We'll leave pukakoe alone so that we can leave our fertile land for growing agriculture. And what we want to do is actually stabilise the land price, because when you tax something, you stabilise the price, and that's what we want to see. And if we can take the burden off of income and onto land, then people have more money to actually spend on the economy. And that's what we see, because we see that actually housing and affordable housing is the biggest impact in child health and child development.
Thank you.
So there's no question we're desperately short of houses, but we're not short on land. So National wants to unlock that. We want to rezone, get councils to rezone, and make sure that there's 30-year infrastructure plans are in place for more houses to be built at the end of the day. National says councils need to have more flexibility, because currently they don't. Legislation really hamstrings them by what they do, and that we have to look at our targeted rates as well. So the performance is, we know it's below par. So how are we going to fix this at the end of the day? And as you can see, I'm still looking at my notes, and I know that's disappointing for you, and I'm sorry about that. But when I look at the levels of social infrastructure currently, where National is currently sitting, is that we've got to unlock our land and give the growth back to our people to be able to invest in our homes, so that we've actually got something really tangible to give at the end of the day.
Thank you.
As you all know, in 2010, when we came into government, we came into a social housing deficit. And as of last month, we've built 12,000 more public homes for New Zealand. And that includes not only Kaioura builds, but also in the area that I used to represent, which is Botany. I was a list MP in Botany. We did all sorts of different social housing, so included in some of the other party policies. We are doing that now. So what MSD were able to do is work with people like Salvation Army, for instance. When they built their social housing, we were able to come in and provide all of the soft support, provide the rent, as well as all of the other infrastructure needed for people like Salvation Army to come and do their social housing. So it is happening already right now. But what's really important as well is to make sure that the whole entire renting market, if you call it that, is stable and is one that where we can look after all of the renters. So we are the party for warmer, drier Kiwi homes, and making sure that all of our rentals are at a standard that we've implemented in 2017, and making sure that we look after the renters. We were the ones who abolished the no excuse, kicking people out of their homes, and I know that the National Party wants to bring that back in. So we have to actually take a stand and say that we as society need to look after our renters who are in a much more vulnerable position in that relationship. We're also the ones who stop negative gearing, and making sure that if you are a first-time home buyer like I was a year ago, making sure that we actually even stood a chance against all of those property speculators, and making sure that they couldn't just use their tax to give them extra edge when they're applying for their mortgages as well, and for investment into properties. So it's about making sure we level the playing field, about banning overseas investment as well, offshore investment. But at the same time, I think we've got a long way to go as well. And so I think on this issue, once again, because we haven't come out with a manifesto, but what I will say on housing is judge us by our record. And so we know, you see the commitment that we've had to building new public housing, and you'll see that in the next term of a Labour government as well.